Do you think Netanyahu's government, and we talked about how Netanyahu and Dermer now they're working hand in glove with Witkoff, working the internal politics of Netanyahu's government, and which is new. You're painting a picture in which Netanyahu could possibly hold everything together. Do you think there's also a possibility that Netanyahu's government could just simply not survive the next phase of the deal? Or are you saying that the U.S. support for a possible Israeli attack on Iran could be what holds this government together through phase 2?
I think that the Netanyahu government might not survive this, and I think this entire thing can explode. And I can absolutely see how. For instance, if the president says, you go through phase 2 of the deal, and that's it. And during this phase 2, then we discuss Saudi Arabia and the rest. But we need to go through phase 2 because the Saudis will say, phase 2 is a deal breaker for us, and the White House will buy into that argument. And then it's very possible that we'll see a direct confrontation between Israel and the US. I absolutely do not think that Netanyahu is willing to commit to a realist timeline for Palestinian statehood. And as far as I know, Dan, this is what the Saudis have been demanding. I don't know about the great strides that Ron Dermer has been making in negotiating with them. And if the Saudis are moving towards, away from the position of we need a date for the Palestinian state, I think you and I were in the same room when we heard a Saudi official say how serious the Saudis are, was less than a year ago, that they actually mean business. They want to see this state not like in a decade. This is not a George W. Bush roadmap.
Or in the Camp David, Egypt-Israel treaty negotiations where Begin ultimately got Carter and Sadat to agree to basically a path towards Palestinian self-government. And they had like a 5-year time horizon where they would work on this. It was very...
And let's also remember... airy. It was very airy, and it didn't happen.
Airy.
And Sadat got...
Vague. It was vague.
Sadat, the president of Egypt, got murdered. He was assassinated by the Muslim Brotherhood. And the reason I'm raising this is because there were quotes of Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, talking about the risk to his life as a result of this possible agreement with Israel. And usually when leaders start talking about risks to their lives, it's a sign that they're going to be very vigilant at the agreement. So this is very complex. And somewhere here in this triangle of Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States, there needs to be a real breakthrough. And also remember that the Saudis are much better placed today in Washington with the Republican administration than they were with Democrats. And remember what you know better than me, Dan, that there is a problem in procuring the votes to have the 2/3 majority you need in order to pass the sort of defense pact that the Saudi kingdom wants in return to normalization with Israel. And above everything I just said, there is only one person, one man, who can somehow make this happen. And this is, with no doubt, Donald J. Trump. Because Trump wants to see a historic peace agreement in the region, because this is part of his legacy, because he was dead set on this in 2016, because he will receive, I think, and should receive the Nobel Peace Prize if he gets this through with Gaza. And I would say, I don't want to be too stingy about this, but definitely more entitled to it than Barack Obama, who got it when 2017 or 2018 or something.
No. Barack Obama got it in 2009.
I just remember a year after. Yeah. So if the president,
he hadn't done a thing.
If the president is dead set on getting the Nobel Peace Prize, and we know that this is something that's discussed in the White House. This is important, right? Symbols are important. Your name is important. And I say this to the credit, as long as it works for us Israelis and the people in the region, in the Middle East, this is great. So I think that if Trump is going to employ the full force of the United States in the region, then we can see wonders happening in that sense. But it does also entail a lot of policy making and politics and diplomacy of the highest level. It's not going to just happen. Specifically Gaza, specifically solving the issue of Gaza. And if the result would be that Bibi will allow a bluff in Gaza, a bluff in the sense that Hamas will continue to control Gaza and will bring an agreement with Saudi Arabia, that will make him a center-left politician in Israel. And that might endanger his position in the short term as prime minister.
I'll just say, and we can wrap here, just when you say the any normalization will need votes, Democratic votes in the Senate, just to put a fine point underlining what you mean here, the Saudis, yes, it's normalization with Israel, but what this would also be, and which is even more paramount, is a closer defense cooperation relationship with the United States, which it only wants, from what I understand, in the form of a formal treaty, because only a formal treaty can survive changes in U.S. administration. It doesn't want to have a deal with the Trump administration, and then some other administration comes in and then policy changes. They want a formal treaty. And the only way you get a formal treaty is it be ratified by the Senate. And in order to be ratified by the Senate, you need 67 votes, and there are only 53. There are 53 Republicans, so you need, at least a dozen. You probably need close to 15 for cushion's sake, Democratic votes in the Senate. And to your point, Nadav, if this ultimately ends with Donald Trump getting the Nobel Peace Prize, as important as this would be to all Americans of both parties, including Democrats, effectively expanding the Abraham Accords, bringing the most important Arab country in the Middle East into normalization, and getting some kind of resolution in Gaza, as important as that would be for the United States, for U.S. interests and U.S. policy objectives, if it ends with Donald Trump in Norway, in Oslo, getting the Nobel Peace Prize, that may be too much for them to stomach, giving him that kind of win and a legacy. And by the way, there may be some Republicans, to be fair, who are uneasy with major defense commitments, the deepening defense commitments in the Middle East. So there's a lot of complexity here, but if it ends with Donald Trump having a major diplomatic win as part of his legacy, how that reality translates into 67 votes in the United States Senate is not easy to see from here to there, but there's something going on right now, and it's definitely real. And I think it obviously bears close monitoring, and I think we'll learn a little more about all of this in these days ahead during the Netanyahu visit to Washington.
Yeah, and I want to say just one last thing about, because you mentioned the word real, and I want to say something, because we spoke about high diplomacy now, but we began with the hostages. What's really very real is that even if this phase goes through to the end, and I hope it does, this phase of the hostage deal, we will still have dozens of Israelis alive, and probably some dead, held by Hamas, many of whom are the young Israeli men and the soldiers taken. And their families are waiting. And their families know that they're not going to be released in this phase. And one of the things I think that we learned in these weeks after they returned is how could anyone not see how essential it is for the Israeli society that these hostages return. And this is, for me, beyond any sort of breakthrough, this is essential for the Israeli society. And by the way, as far as I know, and what I'm hearing from the White House, the president and the White House understand that. And they are very committed, as far as I'm hearing from the hostage families. They are in direct contact with them. They are committed to getting them all back home. And I think this is very meaningful. And again, I'm crediting this administration for reigniting this effort. And these moments of hope in Israel are very much, to the credit of this administration. and the ultimatum made by President Trump, giving a sense of urgency to all of the sides. It's really a great testament to how policy can make a difference in people's lives and save lives. For these people released, it was like a miracle. It was unbelievable.